Welcome back to the program. Nigeria's Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele is upset with banks' poor corporate governance records and plans to get tough with any of such institutions going forward. Mr. Emefiele was in Lagos on Tuesday and delivered a fiery address to bank executives gathered at the CBN FITC Corporate Governance Workshop. Let's take a listen.
Beyond strengthening its corporate governance code, the CBN also issued a competency framework for the banking industry in Nigeria and a revised circular on approved persons regime to ensure that only fit and proper persons are appointed on the boards of financial institutions. Other improvements introduced include review of board of directors charters and fixed tenure for bank CEOs and other executive directors. Recently, the CBN exposed to external stakeholders the draft codes of corporate governance for 6 other financial institutions, which will soon be issued to the industry. In its drive to further reinforce the corporate governance practices in banks, we have also introduced the Corporate Governance Scorecard. This scorecard is a veritable on-site supervisory tool for gathering information to guide the development of the 2014 code aimed at enhancing the regulatory framework. The scorecard benchmarked against the Code of Corporate Governance is designed to assess compliance and ultimately create incentives for better governance practices. While appreciable momentum had been attained in corporate governance practices in the banking industry, we need not rest on our oars as vulnerabilities are never too far away. The recent economic recession has shown that the financial industry still harbors weaknesses, exemplified by instances of unclear rendition of returns, corporate governance abuses, such as unreported losses, huge exit packages for directors, insider non-performing loans, over-domineering executive management, contravention of regulatory and prudential guidelines, and lending limits, poorly appraised credits, and weakening of shareholders' funds. We still see cases of excessive lending to insiders, and you all need to go back. Perhaps at this meeting also interrogate what should we even make tighter the limits to insider credits. If God has used you to set up a bank and you put in 25 billion in that bank, if you take a loan of 10 billion, what it means is that what you have in that bank is effectively 15 billion. If you take more than 25 billion, it means effectively you don't have any money in that bank again. And considering the fact that you will find weak practices, weak credits practices in setting up credits for insider-related people, it means that there is a need for you all here to think of how can we. When examiners look into your books, what they find is that interest rates for those who have been used to set up the bank is even the lowest in the bank. That is an abuse. That is governance weakness, failure. So we need to really interrogate that at this session. What should we do so that we don't? Indeed, what we find is they use their hands to plunder those institutions rather than using their hands to raise those institutions. They plunder them for selfish, personal reasons. It's not meant to be a warning, but it's meant to say that the CBN is going to get tougher on insider-related facilities. Interestingly, ideas and opinions about corporate governance are in constant flux. Yet one very topical idea we need to explore is the role of independent competent and qualified auditors, and other control functions within the financial industry. Without doubt, these control functions are vital to the corporate governance process in order to achieve a number of important objectives. One, transparency, full disclosure, topping the list. The Board Audit Committee's responsibility for the effectiveness of their organization's internal control systems cannot be taken lightly, making it imperative for membership of those committees, I mean the Audit Committee of the bank, to comprise directors with requisite financial competence to oversee the effective performance of management in those institutions. The task before us, therefore, is to determine how best to move our corporate governance regime to the next level as a sector and as a country in general. In this light, I challenge participants at this program to put on their thinking caps and rise to the occasion. On its part, the CBN shall continue to deploy more robust and risk-sensitive supervisory framework in line with global best practices, in consonance with the rapidly changing environment, to nip potential crises in the board. To this end, we have stepped up capacity building in our supervisory departments to ensure that our examiners are equipped with the requisite skills and tools to effectively supervise banks and other financial institutions. Beyond ensuring compliance by banks and other financial institutions to policies and guidelines, efforts had been made to track developments at the financial institutions leading to, one, efficient licensing and supervisory processes, to evaluate the expertise and integrity of proposed directors and management, as well as the fitness and propriety of promoters and major shareholders. Two, approval of organizational structures that have adequate checks and balances in the institutions being supervised. Three, continuous determination of the appropriateness and soundness of the corporate governance policies and practices in place in the banks. Four, periodic assessments of the quality of internal controls. Five, monitoring of the role and independence of internal and external auditors. Six, meaningful director evaluations and a consideration of shareholder proxy access. And six, improvements to frameworks for disclosure, transparency, and accountability while enforcing appropriate penalty regime to serve as deterrents on participants who flout the rules and guidelines set by the regulator. May I at this juncture remind us that ensuring good governance practices is a responsibility of all. Shareholders, by virtue of their long-term interest in ensuring the safety, soundness, and stability of their investments in the financial system, also have crucial roles to play in taking corporate governance to the highest level by appointing skilled, capable, and experienced directors into their institutions. And both internal and external auditors of institutions have no less roles to play. Similarly, the role of independent directors in ensuring sound corporate governance practices is equally significant. The expectation from them is not just their independence from the management of the business, but more importantly, vast technical and managerial expertise for the good of all of us.